Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This has been another highly popular topic with 1,300 people registered to attend today's webinar, Developing a Growth Mindset and Your Personality for Success. My name is Kat Duco, and I'm the Marketing and Business Development Manager at the Myers-Briggs Company. I'll be assisting with questions and comments throughout the webinar. Due to the large number of participants, we will keep everyone on mute to avoid background noise, so please use the questions box feature on your GoToWebinar panel to provide feedback and ask your questions. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly introduce you to the Myers-Briggs Company. Our mission is to inspire everyone to lead more successful and fulfilling lives, and we deliver on our mission through various approaches, through our consulting solutions, our research services, certification training, and through our range of assessments. Our goal is to maximize the performance of leaders, teams, and organizations through the use of our psychometric tools and professional services. And sharing our expertise is also part of what we do as a certified B Corporation, which is a movement we're incredibly proud to be a part of. Being a B Corp is about putting a focus on our environment, people, and the community around us as part of everything that we do. It's a fairly new concept, but one that's gaining huge momentum, particularly in the Asia Pacific region, and we encourage you to learn more about it. Today's webinar will run for about an hour and will be facilitated by Dr. Martin Bolt, Senior Director of Professional Services and Psychologist at the Myers-Briggs Company. Martin has extensive experience working with organizations across the Asia-Pacific region in areas including team effectiveness, executive leadership development, organizational change, virtual training solutions, workplace well-being, and resilience. He is also our lead assessment certification trainer. Today, Martin will be discussing how developing a growth mindset along with understanding personality preferences can boost performance with individuals, in teams, and organization-wide. And with that, I will turn you over to Martin.
Thanks, Kat, and welcome to everyone who's joined our webinar today. And as Kat mentioned, the session is not only sharing information with you from our experience about applying the growth mindset and personality concepts, but we're also interested in getting your thoughts and responses as we go through. So hopefully everyone's ready to contribute as we move through. And just to maybe start with some questions that you could reflect on for yourself here. So how long would you be willing to work on something to get it the best it can be? How much effort would you put in? At what point might you find it too much to get it the best it can be? Or what do you do when you struggle to learn something new? What's your first instinct or reaction? And then what do you actually find yourself doing if it turns out to be more difficult to learn what you set out to learn? Or how many times have you practiced something to master it, to feel completely at ease and competent with it? And how much effort did it take for you to get to that point? Or also maybe consider who is someone you admire for accomplishing something that was exceptional, or maybe someone who you consider to be your hero and inspiration who actually really succeeded at something, and what was behind their ability to succeed or achieve that outcome. So these are some questions that might prompt your own thinking around your own views about mindset and what can and cannot be easily developed. But here are some examples of some people who have made some exceptional accomplishments, and accomplishments that really required a lot of persistence and tremendous effort. So first of all, starting with Wolfgang Mozart. Now, Mozart is considered a genius and a prodigy and one of the most successful and famous composers ever in history. But did you know that most of his most iconic musical pieces took more than 10 years for him to write and to refine and to work on? So he was far from an overnight success. Or another example might be when you think of a bright idea, the concept of a light bulb comes to mind, and the inventor Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb and in fact had over 1,000 patents to his name. He was also a successful entrepreneur. A lot of his successes attributed to not simply his creativity, but rather his endless pursuit of persisting at something until he got it right, until he worked it out. And Edison has a famous quote, which is, "Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration." So that tells us really what was behind his success. When we think about the world of sport, every sport has its heroes, and Michael Jordan is considered one of the most successful sports people in the world. And while he may have looked like a natural as you watched him play basketball, those close to him know that he was actually dropped from his high school team, and he also was not recruited for the first two college basketball teams that he applied for. He's the first to admit that he had to build his skills to the point of where he mastered them. And he actually said that mental toughness and heart are a lot stronger than some of the physical advantages you may have. In fact, his teammates and coaches have said that he practiced more than others in his peers and didn't give up when he actually failed at something. Or in the world of literature, Theodore Geisel, who's actually better known as Dr. Seuss, an author of famous children's books, which today have sold over 600 million copies. Some of the books you might be familiar with that he wrote are Cat in a Hat or Horton Hears a Who. And he initially started his career as an advertising copyright editor, but in actual fact, his passion was writing creative children's stories. And as he worked on that, he got to a point where his first book, which was titled And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street, was rejected by 27 different publishers before it was eventually accepted and published in 1937. So can you imagine if Dr. Seuss had not persisted with his vision and passion, many of our childhoods would be less entertaining. And finally, in my garden shed, I have a can of this concoction, WD-40. For many years, I wondered how the company came up with the name for this product, for this well-known lubricant that probably a lot of people are using for different purposes around the house. And I discovered that it was actually invented first in 1953 and took 40 attempts to get the right formula. So that goes to show that nothing comes easily in that first go, and a lot of persistence and effort was put into perfecting that successful product. So we've talked a lot about some, I guess, notable and famous accomplishments, but what does this mean for our personal views and beliefs about our abilities, our talents, and our personality? So are your abilities or talents something that you were born with? Or can you, in fact, develop your character and personality? And these are the sorts of questions that have led to a lot of research looking at the concept of mindsets, which was initially pioneered by Professor Carol Dweck. So today in our session, we'll look at how different mindsets, be they fixed or growth, affect what people ultimately accomplish, but also how our personality type might also be part of our development and how our mindset and personality type work together. And we'll look at a well-known theory of personality measured by the MBTI instruments, looking at different personality types. But I wanted to start here with some other questions for you to start to think about and what this means for you and understanding of mindset. So consider your level of agreement or disagreement with the statements that I have here on screen. And also consider if you think these statements reflect either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And in a few minutes after I talk about the different mindsets, we'll come back to these questions and invite you to share your responses in a poll. So be ready to participate. So the lead author of the work on mindsets, as I mentioned, is Carol Dweck from Stanford University. And her initial work started in the 1990s and led her to defining and validating research about the effect of different mindsets and how that influences how we learn, our levels of motivation, and even its impact on our relationships. So a mindset is a mental framework that influences how we think, feel, and act when we need to learn or achieve an outcome. And Dweck identified that there are different kinds of mindsets. One she called a fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset is where people have a view or a belief that abilities are largely static or fixed and not really amenable to being changed, if at all. It's a belief that if you're smart, you've got it, and if you're not born with it, then you really don't have it. The other mindset she identified is known as a growth mindset, and this is where abilities are believed to be or considered to be malleable and can be developed through concerted effort and practice. It's a belief that you can learn and develop something even if it's initially difficult or it doesn't feel natural. And again, the two quotes here on screen really designed to reflect the different approach to the mindsets. So the fixed mindset, someone might have a belief that you cannot teach an old dog new tricks, whereas someone with a growth mindset acknowledges that every master was once a disaster. It takes time to get there. Now, Dweck also identified that most of us actually have a combination of both fixed and growth mindset beliefs based on certain abilities. For example, you may have a growth mindset about intelligence. That is, all people have a capacity to learn and develop their intelligence. At the same time, you may have a belief that certain skill or ability is quite fixed, such as artistic ability, or that you're either born with that ability or not. So our mindsets can also change from one setting to another. We may believe that a person in our family can develop a skill or a talent because we see them working consistently on it, but then we might have a view or a belief that a work colleague is not really going to be able to develop a particular skill, such as a business skill or becoming an effective leader, because we believe they just don't have that capacity to change. So Carol Dweck stated that having a growth mindset doesn't mean everyone has the same talent or ability, but it does mean we believe everyone can grow and develop if we apply effort to learn and persist with that growth. So when someone is finding it a struggle to learn something new or to develop a new skill, a person with a growth mindset says, I haven't learned it yet. So there's this understanding that with more effort and persistence, things can be improved. So the mindset a person holds has been found to have some real effects in outcomes in life. And for more than 10 years of research looking at different beliefs and how they affect us, we get to a picture of some interesting outcomes for people who might have a fixed mindset. Key to this is people with a fixed mindset might actually have a view that if they achieve something, it was either due to their innate ability or potentially luck. And if they make mistakes, then it's really a signal that they cannot do it because they don't have an innate ability for it. Or they will often have a view that behaviour is really the result of innate or static traits that a person possesses, such as aspects of their personality, intelligence, or biology. And there's not much to be possibility to change those things. We also tend to see people who have a fixed mindset that if they look at a group of people who share something in common, it could be an ethnicity, an occupation, they will often view that group of people as all possessing the same traits and really not expect them to behave in ways outside of that traits or not see within group differences. And a fascinating bit of research is also people with a fixed mindset are more likely to support penalising or punishing immoral behaviour as a method to prevent that happening again. So if I hold a fixed mindset, I'm more likely to believe how a person behaves is due to their innate character or biology, and therefore I'm more likely to make predictions about the person based on what I know about them. Also, a person with a fixed mindset might expect a person's underlying intelligence to be relatively set once they reach adulthood, or hold a view that people of a particular occupational group or ethnicity have the same characteristics and therefore they'll be expected to behave the same way over and over again. Now, when we actually look at what are some of the implications of a fixed mindset in a workplace setting, what we actually see is people with this kind of mindset are less willing to innovate or take risks. And it also impacts on discretionary effort. They're less likely to put in more effort if they believe that it's something they cannot really change. Learning and training and development with a fixed mindset is viewed as having a very limited effect on actually changing behaviours. There's only so far learning or education can help. And there is little expectation of people learning or behaving beyond what they are known for. Also, in a workplace setting, if people are behaving in inappropriate or in ways that aren't expected, the best way to address that behaviour, if you have a fixed mindset, is to use reprimands, penalties, or reduce incentives. So when we look at growth mindset and what are some of the outcomes that come from that, a person who has a growth mindset believes that you can make changes or improve things with effort, learning, and opportunities to do so. A person with a growth mindset is less likely to judge a person based on one or two observations. They're more likely to assume that people might do things differently or change over time. So as a result of that, if someone is successful or accomplishes something and they possess a growth mindset, they'll often put it down to the amount of effort or persistence and learning that they put in. And if they do encounter mistakes, it's not a reason to assume that they cannot learn it, but in actual fact, it highlights that they just haven't learned it yet. Also, people with a growth mindset are more likely to view behaviour as the result of the context that the person's in and choices that they make, how much self-control that they exercise. Also, they'll tend to see differences between, or pick up on differences between people who share a common characteristic, again, such as a group of people from the same ethnicity or occupational group. A person with a growth mindset will not be surprised if they see someone behaving in ways that are different to the rest of that group and acknowledge within group differences. And also what I found fascinating was people with a growth mindset view that the best way of addressing inappropriate or immoral behaviour is to offer rehabilitation or education to reform the behaviour. So if I hold a growth mindset, I expect people can and do change as a result of using or adding to their abilities. And people with a growth mindset are more likely to expect members of groups to be able to make those changes. And equally, they're more likely to see the benefit of education and training as being able to adjust behaviours. A particular interesting outcome was a study showing that when Israeli and Palestinian people were exposed to the idea that groups can change, they actually improved their attitudes towards each other, which then enhanced their willingness to compromise and negotiate for peaceful outcomes. So growth mindsets in the workplace, what could be some of the impact there? Well, first of all, people with a growth mindset are more willing to innovate and take risks, and also exercise discretionary effort, because with more effort, change can occur. Learning, training and development are considered as ways to enable behaviours for change. So there's value and benefit in investing in that sort of training and education. They'll also expect people to behave differently for what they're known for. So they won't assume someone will always end up behaving or doing the same thing over and over again. And of course, in the workplace, if they come across people behaving in inappropriate or immoral ways, they're more likely to try and address that through corrective feedback and providing support for people to make changes. So now thinking about the questions I got you to consider a few moments ago, and let's look at it from a polling point of view. So I'll ask Kat to help us share what kind of responses we're getting. So we're going to launch a poll here. And what I'll ask you to do is think about each statement and whether that statement reflects a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. So you'll be able to cast your vote for each question. So let's look at the first one. Intelligence is something people are born with and doesn't change. So I'll just give everyone a few moments to cast your votes. And as the votes are coming in, then I'll ask you, Kat, if you wouldn't mind sharing what sort of numbers we're seeing for either a fixed or a growth mindset response to the first question.
Thanks, Martin. And we've had the poll open for a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and close it off now. It looks like most people majority came through with fixed mindset for the first one.
Okay, good. And we'll look at the answers to these as we go through. So let's launch the next question. The harder you work at something, the better you will be at it. So again, does that sound like a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? And again, just a few moments for everyone to cast their votes.
Okay, and I'll close that one off as well. Looks like the majority came through with growth on that one.
Okay, so let's go to question 3. People are basically good, but sometimes make terrible decisions. So does that sound like a fixed or a growth mindset? And again, just to give everyone a few moments to cast their votes for that one also.
Great. And this one's looking a bit more, some on either side. So we're seeing a little bit more growth on that one, but some more fixed as well.
Okay, it's a bit of a mixed view on that number 3. And let's go to number 4. It's better to learn new things that enhance your strengths. So is that sounding like a fixed mindset view or a growth mindset view?
Okay. This one too looks like a bit of a mix here, however a little bit more towards the fixed side.
All right. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks everyone for sharing your thoughts, and hopefully that got you thinking about the different mindsets. So let's look at what each of these statements reflects. So the first one is really pointing to a fixed view of intelligence, and that is people either are born with certain intellectual abilities and there really isn't any opportunity to change. The harder you work at something, the better you'll be at it, is really reinforcing that growth mindset, that with effort, persistence, opportunities, people can actually develop and improve. People are basically good, but sometimes make terrible decisions. So I think this one, we've got a few mixed answers on that, but it really is highlighting that people can change what they previously been doing, even if they've made mistakes or terrible decisions previously. So that's the growth mindset. And the last one, it's better to learn things that enhance your strengths. So while that might sound like someone does see that they can grow and develop, people with a fixed mindset are more likely to try and develop or focus on what they know or feel they naturally can do. So focusing on strengths. So maybe have a think about your own views of those statements and how they relate to your own mindsets. Maybe to put this into some scenarios for you, and again, I might invite you to cast your vote of whether it looks like a fixed mindset or a growth mindset by putting an F for fixed mindset in the question box, or G for a growth mindset in the question box. And again, I'll invite Kat to share sort of a brief summary of what we're seeing in your responses here. So if you're in this scenario, a manager asks an employee to change to a different project where their skills could be developed and used on a project that better suited their natural abilities. So which mindset do you think the manager is demonstrating here? So again, I'll just give everyone a few moments, Kat, for everyone to cast their votes of fixed or growth, F or G. And if you could maybe share with us what sort of responses are coming through.
Yep, getting quite a few responses coming through. It looks like the majority of them, though, are fixed.
Okay. So if you were pointing to a fixed mindset on this one, you'd be thinking correctly. Now, if we think about why does this scenario look like a fixed mindset, just to highlight that this manager is pointing to that a person has a natural set of abilities, or a belief that this person has a natural set of abilities, and therefore is really only concentrating on what they think the person is capable of doing rather than considering where they could grow and develop. So thanks for sharing there. And another opportunity for you all to cast a response around fixed or growth. So if you're in this scenario, one of your finance staff has been making the same error in financial reports, despite you showing them 3 times how to correct the error. So you believe they'll probably keep making the same error again, even if you show them how to correct it. So this time you ask another team member to help them fix the error. So which mindset are you demonstrating if you're the person responsible for dealing with this finance staff member? So again, in the question box, if you can cast your response with either F for fixed or G for growth. And again, we'll give a few moments, Kat, just for everyone to put some responses in there.
Okay, I'm getting a few coming through here. This looks a bit more mixed than the last one, so some fixed and some growth.
Okay, So again, that's probably a fair outcome given this scenario does reflect elements of both fixed and growth mindset. So what stands out for the fixed part? Well, the part of the scenario where the person believes that they'll probably keep making the same error assumes that this person really can't change much or build on what they are not able to do. Whereas the green part of the statement is really highlighting that the person is now saying there is some kind of opportunity they can provide them to help them learn to fix the error. I guess this scenario probably picks up what is real for many of us, is that we often have a blend of these mindsets, but that will ultimately influence our choices or how much effort we put into trying to improve things. So our mindset influences how much effort, persistence, or another phrase that's used these days is grit, we will exert when faced with learning. And in actual fact, multiple studies have shown there is not a strong relationship between the mindset a person has and our particular personality or intelligence or even academic performance. So our mindset's not really determined by these things, it's independent. There are differences in the functioning of brains also for people who have different mindsets. So when they've looked at people's brain activity through brain scans during learning activities, they find people with a growth mindset show more activity when they're learning something than when they're receiving information about their performance or scores. In contrast, people with a fixed mindset showed more brain activity when receiving feedback about their performance or scores, what they got right and what they got wrong. It's also been found that managers at work who are found to have more of a fixed mindset are less likely to ask for or receive feedback from co-workers, and they're also likely to offer less training, coaching and development for their employees, possibly because they have a view that not much can be really changed. We've also seen that neuroscience shows our brains can change when we apply effort and learning something new, particularly through repetition and trying to master something. The brain is adaptable, and therefore that really reinforces that a growth mindset can help us adapt and build capabilities at a very neuroscientific level. Also, our self-talk, the internal dialogue we have with ourselves, indicates what our mindset may be. So when you struggle to learn something, if you're saying to yourself, I really just can't learn this, that might point to more of a fixed mindset, and you can see what the flow-on outcomes would be. It might be lead us to give up at that point. Whereas if we struggle to learn something new, we have a view, well, I haven't learned this yet, but if I keep working on it, I can get there. That's going to lead to probably someone having a growth mindset and putting more effort in. And Carol Dweck actually found that this is the case, particularly even in school settings where children who were taught about a growth mindset improved their academic performance. So where does personality fit into the whole picture? So our personality and mindset do interact. And why is it important to consider personality in this kind of development? Well, first of all, starting with how we would define personality. It's the habitual ways in which we think, feel and act on most occasions. Our personality really influences what we pay attention to, what we care about, and how we make decisions. So it's really a combination of characteristics and traits that reflect mental habits that are inborn and are innate and enduring through life. But when we look at personality, we all know that we can learn to use and shape our internal innate habits to be more effective in different situations. The author of a well-established personality instrument, the Myers-Briggs indicator, Isabel Myers, also acknowledged that our personality is an set of inborn or innate characteristics, but highlighted that all of us, regardless of our personality type or preferences, can and do develop our preferences through life. And she noted our development of our type can also be significantly influenced by the environments that we're in or where we learn and grow. So why would knowing our personality type be helpful or important, particularly as it relates to growth mindset or development? Well, the starting point for any development is becoming aware of what our underlying preferred ways of doing things are. What is comfortable and what's going to be more of a stretch for us. If we're unaware of these preferences, we're less aware of or less conscious of the impact of our underlying personality on our behaviour. And if we're unaware of it, then there's a risk that we may end up behaving based on our preferences, that is, our personality is driving our behaviour, without much conscious control by ourselves. So to learn, we have to be aware of what our preferences are, and then to make conscious choices about where I will exert effort and what's going to come more easily to me, also what's going to come with more effort and struggle, and how much effort I need to exert to get there. So the MBTI assessment is a great way of understanding what our natural underlying personality preferences are. It's one of the few personality instruments that represents all personality preferences or all personality types as having positive aspects, but all personality types have parts where they need to develop or potential blind spots, if you like. And by knowing this about our personality type, we can make conscious choices to improve and develop them. So some of you may be familiar with the MBTI and the type theory that the instrument's based on. The theory is originally proposed by Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, and it highlights that there are a set of personality preferences that are part of our personality. And here they are on screen. So what you'll note is, if you're familiar with the type theory, all of us can use all of these preferences. But in each pair of preferences, we have a natural preference or comfort to rely on and use that preference. So the first pair of preferences, extroversion, introversion, in the theory looks at where do we naturally gain and direct our mental attention and energy. Sensing and intuition looks at what kind of information we tend to rely on or trust or focus on. Thinking and feeling looks at what we prefer to focus on or prioritize when making decisions. And judging, perceiving looks at how we prefer to go about completing or getting things done, or another way of thinking about it is how we prefer to use our time. And of course, when we put all those personality preferences together in all their possible combinations, we end up with 16 broad personality types measured by the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And this is where you can see that all 16 personality types have potential to grow and develop. And all 16 personality types have particular areas that are going to take more effort and energy to grow and develop. So the originator of the MBTI theory, Carl Jung, stated we all have an instinct that pushes us to grow towards being or achieving what he called a completion of our personality type. Ultimately, that's a mature version of who we are and our personality. And the way we move towards completion is by expanding our knowledge and awareness of ourselves, which increases our ability to control and direct our lives. We learn more about ourselves by living, working, and relating to others, as well as reflecting on our lives. And you'll see in the MBTI materials that people use to learn about their type or to learn about how to work with other people of different types, that it highlights all personality types measured by the MBTI have capacity to be their best, and all personality types have areas where they naturally need to grow. So when we think about the theory that the MBTI is measuring, it's not simply saying you are that type and you're fixed or static in that type. Sure, our preferences are inborn and part of our innate personality, but the personality theory also proposes that there are stages of life that all of us naturally grow and move through that leads to developing a well-rounded, mature personality. And the three major stages here that are represented on the screen are the first half of life, midlife, and the second half of life. So in the first half of life, Jung and Myers both described that our main development goal is to learn what I prefer and to build confidence in using those natural innate preferences. So for young people, it's helping them discover for themselves who they are and what they naturally prefer to do and what they have less interest or find more of a stretch to develop. As we grow and develop and move further through life, we move into the next stage, which is midlife. This is where it prompts people to explore or experiment with different ways of living, working, and existing. And this is usually our first opportunities to look at the parts of our personality that we weren't using or naturally developing when we were younger, and to explore that through new relationships, new work opportunities, and indeed even new hobbies that you mightn't have considered undertaking when you were younger. And finally, in the second half of life is where people have now learned and built some comfort using the less preferred parts of their personality. For example, a person might be clear as a young person that they naturally prefer extroversion and have spent much of their younger years entertaining and using that extroverted preference in their social and work life. As someone reaches the second half of life, they may be aware that they're not naturally an extrovert, but have seen the value and the benefit and the gifts of adopting some introverted approaches in their life, and they become more comfortable doing that. So ultimately, as we go through life, we become more flexible in the use of our preferences as opposed to changing our personality type. So development of type is an interaction between a person's innate type and the environment that they grow and learn and experience. For some people, the environment might support their natural preferences, and their growth tends to follow that innate type preference development. For other people, they may grow up in an environment that has expected or encouraged them to do the opposite to their natural preferences. And this is where people have had to learn early on how to adapt and use approaches that may not naturally fit their personality. So our MBTI type doesn't develop in a vacuum. Our type is influenced by what's within ourselves as well as what's in the environment around us. And what the MBTI assessment is designed to do is help us pinpoint what are those innate, inborn characteristics that are part of human nature. We also need to be aware of the environment and the cultural norms that we've grown and learned to develop in. So culture, we learn about that through life, the way we do things around here. So really, when we think about personality, it's not just a set of fixed innate characteristics. They're inborn characteristics and preferences that are interacting with cultural or environmental expectations. So essentially, when we look at one of the MBTI personality types, for example, an ENFP type, they're not simply an ENFP person, they're an ENFP person who's learned and developed within a particular cultural environmental setting. And this is why you can find people who share the same type preferences don't behave in exactly the same way because of the cultural and environmental conditioning they've experienced. So here are some questions for you to maybe reflect on. What did your family and culture support in your personality type? Or what was discouraged about your personality type? And what preferences in your personality are you motivated to develop? Which ones have you maybe not spent much time working on or practicing? And what would motivate you to develop those? So having a growth mindset actually helps us understand or even influences how much we believe we can develop our personality, and also how much effort we're likely to put into developing ourselves. The MBTI framework shows that all personality types have a potential to grow and develop. So being more aware of our natural preferences will actually give us the starting point of what we need to develop. Becoming comfortable using approaches that are opposite to our preferences is an example of how we develop our personality. And consciously developing all parts of our personality through life is a way that we can round out and develop the best version of our personality. So a person who embarks on that kind of development through life is essentially using a growth mindset. People who might have a fixed mindset about their personality will often say, well, there's not much point to trying to learn to do things differently because I am what I am and I really will never change. So thinking about the MBTI preferences, there are some very practical and easy, straightforward ways to start developing any of the preferences. And so today I'll share with you one example of how we may develop a preference. And we'll look at the extroversion, introversion preferences. And what I might again ask everyone to do is, just so we've got a sense of how many people we have as part of our audience today who have this preference, in the question box, if you can type E if you think extroversion or no, extroversion is your preference, or I if you think your preference is introversion. And in a few moments, I'll ask Kat just to give us a picture of how many people preferring extroversion or introversion have joined our session today. But to give you a bit of definition around these preferences. So people who prefer extroversion tend to act before thinking. They prefer to take action quickly because they're energized by doing things. They often like to talk things through because that enables them to get clarity of their thinking, and can appear more expressive when interacting with other people. They often gain energy through interaction, not just with people, but activities in the outer world. And people who prefer extroversion often have a breadth of interests. People who prefer introversion tend to think before acting. They prefer to spend time reflecting before responding because it helps them build clarity of their thoughts. So that you'll often see them liking to think things through before discussing or taking action. And as a result, they can appear more contained when interacting with other people. They'll often gain energy by opportunities to have concentration or deep reflection, and they'll often prefer to have a few interests but to know them very deeply. So have a think about what your preferences are. For some of you, you may have measured yourself with the MBTI previously and have understanding your preferences. For others, it may be just exploring these definitions and seeing what you think is natural for you. So Kat, what are we seeing in terms of the number of extroverts and introverts in our session today?
We've had quite a few people respond, but it looks like a pretty equal mix of extroverts and introverts in the group.
Okay, good. Well, good to know that we've got an equal mix. And that's probably no surprise because we do know from research that extroverts and introverts in a population are almost a 50-50 split. So for those of you who prefer extroversion, what can you do to develop your comfort behaving in a more introverted way, or to develop that part of your personality? Or for those who prefer introversion, what can you do to develop comfort behaving in an extroverted way? So I'll share with you a couple of examples which you are welcome to try out or maybe consider for your own preference. So for those who prefer extroversion, select a time each day to write down and reflect on what you've actually learned. Or research a topic to a deeper level than you normally would. Then prepare a written summary or speech before discussing it with another person. Or if you prefer introversion, before you have spent time thinking about an idea or a concern you have, try discussing it with another person. Or you could host a social event for a group of people who have not met before. Take on the role of introducing and helping them share what they have in common. And whilst doing the opposite might come at a stretch or feel uncomfortable, that's actually where the growth is really happening. So thinking about how you might develop your type using a growth mindset. How will you build a growth mindset this week? What are some practical, straightforward ways you could do that? Or how can you further develop conscious use of your MBTI personality type this week? So to give you a start here are 4 suggested ways of using a growth mindset to develop yourself. So one example might be use your non-preferred hand to brush your teeth, or use your computer mouse next week. And note for yourself how long it takes to feel comfortable or competent using your less preferred hand. Or think of a real life example where you've used a growth mindset to learn something. How did your mindset help you achieve your goal or solve your problem? Or another option is choose one behavior that is the opposite to your MBTI type preferences that you would like to become more comfortable using. And record the activities where you practice this new behavior, and also how your mindset was, what your mindset was while you were learning and trying that different approach. Or if you really want to help understand your mindset and someone else's, help another person learn something that they might be finding a challenge. Get them to think about what kind of mindset they're bringing to it. Now, after our session today, we'll also be sharing some other tips or strategies drawing on the growth mindset and the MBTI theory. So keep a lookout for that also. I also wanted to share with you that a lot of our work these days is working with individuals as well as organisations on helping use the knowledge of different mindsets and personality to achieve outcomes. So this map on screen shows how the Myers-Briggs company works with individuals, teams, leaders and organisations to reach full potential by applying a growth mindset and also drawing on the insights from the MBTI framework. So at an individual level, think about your career or your team or your organisation and consider what mindset is influencing performance at present. Are you and your co-workers aware of how you can develop your personality to their full potential? Or given the new and rapidly changing challenges we're all facing at present, particularly in a world that's struggling with rapid change through a global pandemic and economic disruption, it will take a growth mindset and clear self-awareness of our personality and skills to not just survive, but find new ways of thriving. So if you are interested in exploring how we could support your work at an individual, a team, or an organisational level, Kat will share some information with you at the end of our session. So, some takeaways from our time together. Your mindset influences multiple outcomes in life, including success in education, work, relationships, organisations, and even society. So think about what mindset you bring to situations where you need to learn something new. You can develop your personality using a growth mindset, and some of the things will take more effort to learn and master, but knowing your personality can help you plan and consciously engage in developing your full potential. A growth mindset and knowledge of personality is a foundation for development. So it's not just for individuals, but it can be useful for people in leadership roles or teams where you're working with people's different learning needs. And as I said, we'll share some more of those tips and insights with you after our webinar today. So at this point, hopefully that's given everyone an understanding of the importance and relevance of a growth mindset and how it relates to our personality. And I'll hand back to Kat now to take us through some next steps. So over to you, Kat.
Thanks, Martin, and thank you all again for joining the webinar today. Martin shared some really great insights and tips for building self-awareness and developing a growth mindset through an understanding of personality preferences. And we'll be taking questions in a few moments, which you can submit through the questions box on your GoToWebinar side panel. But while we wait for those to come through, I'll share a bit more information about our company, including some new resources available through our website. For those of you that are new to the Myers-Briggs company, we work with our clients in a few different ways. If you want us to take the lead, we do offer consulting services where one of our experienced trainers like Martin can get to know your organization and design and deliver a customized solution to meet your business requirements. If you want us to work with you, we can partner with you and be as involved in your projects as you want us to be, whether that's co-facilitating or helping you behind the scenes with designing your workshops. And finally, if you want us to help you upskill to enable you to manage all aspects of design and delivery, you can join our certification programs to gain the knowledge and tools that you need to build that capability internally. We're most well known for the Myers-Briggs type indicator, but we do have other tools to support the entire talent lifecycle, including emotional intelligence, leadership 360-degree feedback, and talent selection tools. If you want more information about our assessments and our services, our website's a really great place to start. If you do need support delivering personality insights to your teams, we've found that developing a growth mindset, building resilience, managing change, and enhancing communication are some of the key topics that people are asking us about this year. And if, like many of our clients, you want to do this or being asked to do this, but don't have the capacity to deliver these kind of programs, we do have these virtual workshops available that might be a really good fit for you. They're short, focused, and again, virtual workshops that are led by one of our expert facilitators who can keep your remote employees engaged and also provide Myers-Briggs personality insights for practical application in the workplace. And if you want to become an MBTI accredited practitioner, I do want to note that we now offer the MBTI certification program as a virtual program. It's the same high quality course as the in-person course, but we now run the sessions through the Zoom platform, which means we can still have breakouts for group work and provide plenty of opportunity for participants to interact with the facilitator as well as other participants. We do have 2 virtual MBTI certification programs remaining in 2020, with the dates are showing on the screen there. They're 4 non-consecutive days of training, and we should know our 2021 training dates by November. So keep an eye out on our website for that. But in addition to the course dates that are listed on the screen, we can organize in-house training at a time that suits you if you have at least 4 or more people in your organization that you want to get MBTI certified. So you can always contact us for more information on that. So with that, we'll turn over to questions here. And we did have quite a few come through. The first one, Martin, is, are there certain personality types that tend to have a growth mindset?
Yeah, well, that question actually sparked the reason why we started looking at a growth mindset and how it relates to personality. So to keep it sort of very succinct, what we've identified and the research shows that no particular personality type or personality characteristic predicts whether you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So what that really highlights is any of the MBTI types could have a growth mindset, and any of the MBTI types could have a fixed mindset. So a lot of it has to do with our internal beliefs about growth and development. Obviously, if we do have a growth mindset, that's going to impact on how we might choose to develop our personality. If we have a fixed mindset, that might lead us to thinking that there's not much that can be changed. But to answer that question, Kat, there's no one particular MBTI type that's more likely to have a growth mindset.
Great, thanks, Martin. The next question is, how do you help managers build a growth mindset with their teams?
Yeah, so I think for managers, the first thing is understanding the impact of mindsets for people they're working with. That includes not only their own mindset as a manager, and as I mentioned, there is now research emerging that managers or leaders who have a particular mindset, that tends to translate into whether they encourage that mindset in people that they're leading. So the starting point, I think, is work with the manager or the leaders, help them get clear about the impact of mindsets, help them identify their own mindset, and then how that manifests or translates into the team that they're working with. Also, helping managers work with team members who might have a particular mindset that's getting in the road of development, and how they can support and encourage them with that. But that's a piece of work that we do a lot of work with client organisations when we're using growth mindset and the type theory or personality theories with development.
Great. And I think we have time for just one more question here. How can a growth mindset be applied across a business?
That's, yeah, a bigger question, probably almost need another whole webinar to look at that. But there is, again, emerging research and some great examples from organisations that have embedded the learning and understanding of a growth mindset and its relevance to the whole organisation. So this is where things like the culture of the organisation, the norms, and I talked about the environment and how that shapes our understanding of development. If the organisation culture is built for a growth mindset and it has a very strong learning orientation and that people can learn and grow and develop, and following from that are the actions or policies and processes support that cultural norm, then you actually will see that a growth mindset is exercised and used throughout the organisation. Where we see organisations struggling with it is when they might espouse that a growth mindset's important, but either the leadership approach the processes, the structuring, or even how learning is distributed in the organisation points more to only being available for people who have certain talents or skills, or that a belief that only certain people can develop those abilities. And so I guess it's raising awareness of what's the cultural norms and then the behaviour that flows from it. Does it look like a growth mindset culture or a fixed mindset culture, and what steps need to be put in place to address that?
Thanks, Martin. And that's a really important question. So I know that could lead to a lot more questions. So if you do want to keep the conversation going with Martin and talk about your own organization and how to approach this within your organization, just let myself or my team members know when we touch base with you in the next couple business days. We can always schedule a free consultation with Martin to discuss growth mindset with your people and across your business. And I know we are out of time today, and there were some questions that went unanswered. So if you didn't get your question answered, we will be in touch with you individually to ensure you get a response. But as mentioned, we will reach out to everyone who's attended the webinar today and send you through a recording in case you missed any of the content, along with a growth mindset activity that Martin put together for everyone. So we'll be in touch with you soon with that information. And of course, just let us know if you do want to set up a call with Martin. And thank you all again for your time today and joining us for the webinar. And Martin, thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Kat, and thank you everyone for joining the session. Hopefully it's been of help for everyone. Take care.